come into this place, let's just take a couple of deep breaths. So as we enter into this space, I ask us to just check in with our bodies. Where are we at? Are you comfortable? Have you taken care of the needs you have coming into this conversation? Have you loved yourself well today? Because you deserve it too. I think that's really the key. So, my friends, as we come in, I want to just ground us into this conversation because I think sometimes we don't always say out loud that this can be a tough one, that this can be a hard place to gather around, and that's okay. We can admit that, and we can also know that we're here for a purpose. So, as we journey together, I want to welcome you to QCF. This is the Q Christian Fellowships program called Beyond Harmony, Building Deep Belonging. And our goal here today is to journey together always at QCF. That is our big passion, is we want to always be in it together with you. So today we're going to do that by hosting this beautiful panel that's come here to share their stories with us. And then each of us, as we kind of finish up that conversation, we'll get a chance to walk away with our own version of an allyship statement. And that can look like a lot of things. And we want to honor that it does look like a lot of things for so many people. And so as you find things that resonate with you, if you feel like you hear something, you're like, I had never thought of it that way. This is such a good opportunity to write that down, make a note to yourself, keep it on your heart, because that might be God speaking in a way that honors the connection you have with your loved ones. Okay, so as we journey into this, let's welcome and introduce our panel. Here we go. Our panel today is moderated by Laura Beth Bucklighter, and she is a speaker, writer, musician, and spiritual director who loves finding a balance of expressing her faith in churches, coffee shops, and the great outdoors. After a lifetime of moving around the country, she is enjoying settling down in the Midwest, where, well, for now, where the amber waves of grain offer emotional and spiritual regulation. She is currently in the process of moving her ordination credentials to the PCUSA while building a worship space focused on healing spiritual trauma. Laura Beth has been active with QCF since 2016. We also get to welcome our panelists today, starting with Carter Kelly. Their pronouns are he, them, and she, and they grew up in the Roman Catholic Church of suburban New York before leaving Christianity entirely as a teenager. A few mystical experiences in an old Russian church, the lakes of northern Wisconsin, and the persistent tugging of Holy Spirit called them back to the faith through a Jesus-loving, inclusive United Methodist congregation in Chicago. Yet God was not done with her yet. Carter began to lead small groups where he deepened in faith through transformative relationships. After a few years, they felt Holy Spirit calling again, and this time into ministry, and a few gentle nudges from friends and family convinced him to go to seminary. Carter lives in Chicago, Illinois, and enjoys taking people to her favorite restaurants, getting in over their head in DIYing. I can never say it, DIYing, there it is. Watching horror movies and reading Afrofuturist speculative fiction. We are also welcomed by Fergus, and I apologize, Fergus, I think Toey?
Tui.
Tui, pleasure. Thank you. And Fergus is a writer, retired financial planner, and former chair of Equality Alabama. He is the son of a former Catholic priest and nun, both from Ireland, who met in Alabama and raised their family in the Deep South, a context that shaped his own coming out experience. Fergus earned degrees from Loyola University, New Orleans, and Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. An avid whitewater kayaker, he now lives in the mountains of Western North Carolina with his husband and their two Australian shepherds. Ruben Verghese, I want to say that one right too, is now 60 years old, retired public health physician, son of Indian immigrants, US born, cisgender male, college educated, differently abled, secular Episcopalian. He is married to an Episcopal priest named David Waucaster. Reuben came out to his parents later in life at age 33 after finally coming out to himself. He wants us to know he is looking forward to this panel. I love that. We're really glad you're here, Reuben. And then, definitely not least, but definitely last, Erin Craig, her pronouns are she, her, is a bi-demisexual Quaker currently serving as presiding clerk of Sierra Cascades yearly meeting of friends. She works as executive assistant at Silverton Area Community Aid, providing all kinds of support to our food pantry, financial assistance programs, and other food and housing security resources. In her free time, she plays clarinet in the Beaverton Community Band, and she and her spouse, Elias Craig, pronouns he, him, live in the Rockwood neighborhood on the east side of Portland, Oregon, with their three cats, Austin, Tonks, and Topanga. Like a good millennial. I love that. Awesome. Okay. All right, friends, I'm going to pass this over to Laura Beth, and she's going to take us on this beautiful journey. So have fun.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our panelists for agreeing to step in and share some of you with us. We're going to start. We're going to do this in a couple of rounds of conversation. I'm going to start just by asking you to introduce yourselves and kind of introduce the context of your coming out. That could be anything you want to feel relevant to share with that. I have come out to parents. I have been come out to as a parent. And yeah, whatever those dynamics feel appropriate for our conversation and for helping some understanding along those lines. Um, so yeah, we'll Ruben, we'll start with you if you don't mind. And you were right in front of me on the screen. So
Okay,
the yeah, just tell us a little bit about your coming out circumstances.
sure. Um, for me, growing up, I had to come out in almost two contexts because I was race was also something that I was aware of, but didn't hadn't confronted it until second grade when I was
Mm.
called the N word, and it was also second grade when I recognized that I was probably gay, but I didn't come out till 33. So uh, those sorts of that's the context in trying to remain in relationship with um, my faith and my parents in a way that honored them as well as me, because I realized that it wasn't just me that was going to be coming out. They were going to be coming out as well. And how do you help in that process? Because they were my only family here in the States since we had immigrated and I was born here. So that was kind of the context and trying to figure out how to do that in a way that seemed to honor myself, honor them, and love God. So I'll leave it there for the moment.
Yeah, so just to paint the big picture, you came to this realization yourself in second grade and were essentially closeted then from second grade till age 33.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's a long time in a deep closet. So thank you. Carter.
Sure, yeah. Um, so I'm from a small town in the suburbs of New York City, and it was a very tight-knit community. Everybody knew everybody else's business, and I took advantage of that for my coming out. I didn't really feel like telling anyone directly, so I came out for the first time as a teenager, swore my friend to secrecy for a year, and then after that year, I told him, I don't care who you tell anymore. It got around as it did, and eventually my mom found out, which I knew she would because all of the moms knew everyone and knew everything. Um, so it was less me telling her and more her coming to ask me if this rumor that she heard about me was true. And it was a very difficult conversation. There was a lot of crying, a lot of um, trying to explain how I was feeling. Uh, she was ultimately supportive, and it was still a really hard conversation and a really hard like thing to go through. Um, yeah, so I guess that's just like the general outline of my coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had a friend who kept that secret for a year?
Well, mostly.
Mostly. Okay. All right. Yeah, mostly is still kind of impressive. I mean, that's a big thing to hold on someone's behalf. So great. Fergus, just tell us a little bit.
Yeah, so I grew up in Alabama, in Birmingham, Alabama, and like Samantha mentioned, my father was a former Roman Catholic priest, and my mother a former nun. Dad became an Episcopal priest, and like Ruben, I was actually in my 30s. I was 31 when I first came out, and it took me a while for several reasons. I had to come out to myself, and I've thought about this, why did it take so long? And I think probably, I mean, you don't need to get like do personal psychoanalysis here exactly, but I suspect that um, growing up Irish and gay in Alabama and in a progressive family, I wanted to fit in, and I had a few things that made me different, and so that was just something I kind of kept down and just pushed down and didn't accept for myself, until I
Mm,
was in my 30s, and really accept it, like absolutely acknowledge it. And but when I did, I told my sister first, and I was very close with my parents. Like we all lived in the same town, and I had Sunday dinner with my parents every week. We were very close, and I was really worried that it was going to damage our relationship. Like, I mean, we were we had a great relationship, and we were so close, and that was my biggest fear, that something was going to change,
mm,
and on a rational level, it didn't make any sense because you know, for one thing, back in the 80s, Dad used to counsel gay men who are dying of AIDS in his parish.
mm,
And when that was unheard of, really, for clergy to do that. And and Mom's best friend was gay. So it was like, but that's just sort of the power of like, conformity, or, wanting to fit in.
mm.
And so finally I did. I came out to my sister, and, I asked her to come help me shop for a piano, use piano. She's a musician, and I told her, and she was very excited for me. And she says, "Well, when are you going to tell mom and dad?" And I was like, "I don't know." She's like, "Well, it's Sunday. Aren't you going over there for dinner tonight? You might as well. No
How
time
about
like the
now?
present." And so I was like, "Okay." And so I did. And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
recommend, yeah.
I mean, there's so much to that whole notion of the social cues all being there. Your dad's counseling, your mom's best friend, everything says acceptance should be there, but the
Hmm.
anticipation of the grief. I mean, your
Right.
parents had a vision for you. They had a vision for grand daughter-in-law and grandkids and all of these things.
Yeah.
And so regardless of those social cues, there is still curiosity and anxiety around what the grief might be and
Hmm.
what that space may be. So thank you, Fergus. Aaron.
I grew up in Orange County, California. And for those that don't know, it's very conservative. I also grew up in the Quaker church, but the context there was extremely evangelical first. Quaker was kind of a secondary component. And so I grew up not really knowing any queer people at all. Saw no bisexual representation at all.
Mm,
And so I assumed I must be straight because I have crushes on boys. So,
right.
that's the default anyway, right? So that's the like early context. And then prior to my current work, I was an elementary teacher for 7 years and worked only in religious schools.
Mm,
Um, and while that was happening, the yearly meeting that I'm currently a part of was formed out of a split with another yearly meeting that split specifically over LGBTQIA plus inclusion.
Mm.
Um, and so all of this is happening, and I found myself feeling very defensive. And so I did a lot of introspection around that. And I ended up coming out to myself as bi while working at a Catholic school. And so those that have Catholic background are, you know, yeah, I'm
It's
with you on
clicking.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so that was when I was about 30. Um, and I hadn't been aware of it really before because I never explored it because I had crushes on boys growing up. So must have been straight. And then as far as like the demisexuality, um, I thought everything I had experienced was sexual attraction. It was not. Um, so yeah, didn't figure that one out
Mm.
until later.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then as far as coming out to my family, my mom and my sister were so much easier for me to come out to than anybody else in my family. I don't even think I really bothered talking to extended family about it at all before I just posted a blog post and shared it on social media. But I did, I texted my mom and my sister because I chickened out in person that day and knew I just needed to do it and be done with it. Um, and my mom's response was basically like, oh, okay, bisexual is new to me, so I have some learning to do, which I thought was great, that
Mhm.
she's approaching it with curiosity. And my sister was like, cool, great, like, no problem. My dad was another story. We have a rocky relationship anyway. We were actively in a period of not talking
Mhm.
when I came out to myself. And so, as part of the therapy work I was doing at the time, I wrote a letter to him and I ended up sending it. And that's how I came out to him. His initial response was a letter back, which is what I'd asked for. And he acknowledged it, but it wasn't so great. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's the other piece is like I came out to myself as bi around 30. A couple years later, demisexual. I just keep figuring things out about myself. So like
Yeah.
I don't think my coming out journey is over. And I'm okay with that.
Yes. Yeah. There's always a little more of that closet to come around from. Two things, if you don't mind. You use two terms that I'd kind of like to give you a chance to identify. You talked about your annual meeting, and that is something in Quaker context that might not translate to other faith traditions. So can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so Quakers are confusing. Typically, yearly meeting gets used in two separate ways. It's both the meeting once a year and
Mm.
also the group of people. So
Yes.
yearly meeting is the group as well. So the easiest way to compare it is like um, uh, what's the Presbyterian word? I can't even get there. I hear it
So
all the
it's
time.
our presbytery.
Presbytery. Wow,
Yeah.
that should have been easier for me to
No,
get to.
that's okay.
And
That's
then
all
like
right.
a
Yeah.
synod or
The synod.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
those kinds of things. But
Mm.
yeah, and we in my particular yearly meeting, we've switched to using yearly meeting just as the name for the people,
Okay.
and we call it
Mm.
annual sessions when we gather. So there's just
Gathers.
a little bit of clarity,
Sure.
but it's still
Yeah.
confusing.
So it is your faith community
Yes.
essentially that you're gathering with. You also brought up demisexual, and that's a word that can be confusing a lot of times. It's not one that
Mhm.
we get as much exposure to. Can you, in 60 seconds or less, and I know that's a tall ask, tell us what demisexual is in your context and how you relate to that?
Yeah. Um, my understanding of it is shifting because it just does. But my current understanding for myself is that prior to experiencing any sexual attraction, I have to have a romantic connection with someone.
Okay.
So once that
Hmm.
develops,
Yeah.
sexual attraction shows up.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
that's not the exact way that everybody else
Hmm.
uses it. Some people consider it an emotional connection, but my sister was the one that actually told me maybe it's romantic because I was like, okay, but I have an emotional connection with my best friends and I'm not sexually attracted to them.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a kind of a slower burn on the sexual attraction.
Yeah.
I often describe it as I fall in love with my closest friends.
Hmm.
It adds a layer of complication
Yeah,
to
it does.
the
Yeah.
journey. So great. Um, so I talk a lot when I'm talking with parents or people in the community about this whole process, about the whole notion of coming around. So coming around to understanding who we are addresses a lot of what you all have talked about, that deeper closet that we have to find our way out of, that process that we go through. And as we are coming around, we have those coming out moments with individuals, and those coming out moments spark a coming around for those people, those institutions, those communities in our lives. And sometimes it's, I'm going to go learn more about that. Sometimes it's a iffy letter. Um, but their coming around starts. Sometimes it is, questioning and grieving and stuff. So their coming around starts with ours. So with this next round of question, I'd kind of like you to dig in a little deeper to that coming around journey that that your family started to engage with you in that process. And um, did that come in sync? Were you guys conflicting? Was there, just give us a little bit more about how that impacted your relationship. You've kind of done a great job so far of walking us right up to that point. Take us to that next. We've gone from 30,000 feet to 15,000 feet. Take us down to 5,000 feet um, in that story. And we'll just go back around the circle again. So, Ruben.
Sure. Just first of all, appreciate what everyone has already said, and just giving a little bit more detail. I had I had been solely coming out to friends because I knew I needed support, and they were very good about keeping the secret because they knew that I needed support. What I didn't know that was that my brother had been such an ally because I had never said anything to him growing up, but he had been working with my mother to say, what if Ruben's gay?
Hmm.
That didn't necessarily mean that she was okay by the time I actually revealed it. And culturally, it was um, maybe it's a little different in the sense that we were here essentially by ourselves. Despite having been in the States for 30 years, we didn't really have much family. They were all in India. And so we were a tight-knit family in one sense, and yet they carried some of the knowledge from the past in some ways. They met my gay friends in college, were perfectly fine, but they were absolutely convinced that and said, oh, homosexuality is a Western construct. We don't know about it.
Hmm.
And so, you know, that was the coming around in many ways that I had to deal with and they had to deal with as well. I mean, very well educated. My parents were well educated, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it overrides culture. And so thinking about that, I had to come around to, in a false way, it's like, my God, am I the first gay Indian that's going to be revealed in the world? I mean, it doesn't matter if I knew that was not
Yeah.
true in one sense, but if you've grown up in a certain way, how do you deal with that? And they had to do that as well. And
Yeah.
for me, that was kind of like, and for them, the coming around process. And how do we still love the person in front of them when they reveal more of who they are? Uh, and
My parents blamed France, so it's fine.
yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
I mean, and they didn't blame it in the end, but they needed to, and so in
Yeah.
that sense, just I wrote a letter but delivered it in person, and my brother joined me when I delivered it, but I also told him and told them, you need to be here by yourself after you read it. And for the next 24 hours, I'll go stay with friends. you need to actually say some of the things you need to say that I may not need to hear this.
Mm.
Because I also knew they needed to vent, but I may not have been in the right space to do that. I knew I was going to get it when I came back. And yet it was that planning sort of thing of just saying, this is, they have a right to say and feel, because, there's Paul, my brother Paul saying it, but that he wasn't the one that was going to reveal the truth.
Right.
And so it didn't matter if you had all this planning that went on or they needed to know. And my mother had to manage my father because he was always the more difficult person. And I knew in the end that when he died a year and a half later that he was accepting. She was the one culturally who had to deal with brothers who told her she was a bad mother because her two sons weren't married. We were supposed to have arranged
Mm.
marriages. It didn't happen.
Wow.
My mother had to deal with the fact that I went from theoretically gay to when she met my first boyfriend, Ernie. Okay, Ruben's no longer theoretically gay.
Mm.
And culturally, helping her come around. And she was wonderful. It's just, I had to remember she had to come around as well. And I needed to nurture it almost as much, not giving up my nurturing. But if I was going to be in a relationship with her, I had to remember she had to adjust as well. And
Yeah.
she'd only had 2 years, 3 years to deal with it. I had almost 33 years of trying to wrestle with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Quick question. I love that setup that you offered to them to have that gap, that intentional time. Have you ever discussed what was different between that initial venting in that 24 hours versus the words that came out to you in those first few days or those first few interactions? Do you think was there an ability, were they able to get some things off their chest that you didn't have to deal with immediately, or do you have any
Well,
sense of that?
sure. Well, I mean, I heard from my brother that it wasn't an easy night. And it's not like suddenly it was easy the day when I came back.
Right.
However, I think the teeth gnashing and probably it would have been harder for me to see what my mother was going through because I think her world collapsed in a sense at that moment because it wasn't just about her. She had to wonder about what her husband would say. Was it her fault? Her brothers would actually say on each visit to India, you must be a bad mother if they're not married yet.
Mm.
So knowing that cultural context, that's a real, I mean, she was the youngest child, so strong woman, but that's a lot of culture to have to battle. And you just can't suddenly go, I'm done with you because how do you give up your family? And so that was the context. So I remember hearing from my brother, and I saw it. It wasn't an easy conversation when I came back. And I knew that they were talking to me. And I knew within
Yeah.
a week that the phone calls that they would make every couple days continued. And that's
Mm.
where for me, they weren't expressive emotionally or at least verbally. But what didn't change was they kept picking up the phone like they would to make sure I was doing okay, that they did right before. And that's when I started to recognize that power, that the love that I knew they had for me was real, that it hadn't
Mm.
changed.
Yeah.
So it was the actions in my family. We would always say actions spoke louder than words. And their actions, there was no long period. They they kept picking up the phone.
Yeah.
And that was important for me.
Yeah. In case anyone's wondering, the goosebumps came at they kept picking up the phone. I mean, that is so powerful. Such a great moment. So thank you. Thank you, Ruben. Carter, tell us about that next level of coming around.
Yeah. Um, I think, I don't know, my mom came around very quickly, maybe too quickly.
Hmm.
Because we had that conversation about me being gay in the spring, and by that summer, she had sort of done talking with her friends, with people that she knew, um, and she connected with this doctor at the hospital that she worked at who was gay, and he was like, "Oh, I'm part of this group for gay Catholics. Why don't you have Carter come join us in the Pride Parade this year?" And so at 16, I was marching in the New York City Pride Parade with Dignity, um, which was way overwhelming. I don't know, like, why I did that and why my mom thought I would be into that, but it was like her trying to be supportive, her like being like, okay, there are other gay people, there are other gay Catholics even. And it was a way for her to understand what was going on. And I think part of it now as an adult and like having talked to her as an adult and knowing some of her own personal history was that she had had two really close friends in college who were gay. And in the 80s, both of them had died of AIDS. And so for her, the only understanding that she had was that like the gay people I love die young and horribly. And
Wow.
it's a good thing she didn't try to process that with me at 16, but it's also like it's been helpful for me as an adult to know that that's like part of where her initial reaction could have come from is her own emotional processing of like, here's another person who's now telling me about being gay, and now I have to remember all the gay people that I've known in my life and the things that have happened to them. And so it was like difficult at times over the next couple years while I was in high school of her trying to be supportive, um, trying to show that she understood and like cared and loved for me, and also like me wanting to be a very independent teenager and not like feel smothered by my mom's love and attention, you know?
Yeah.
And kind of being like, no, mom, I can do things alone. Like, I have my own life. I have my own things that I want to do. I'm such an adult at 16. Like, you don't even need to worry about me. I know everything there is to know. And it's been better as an adult to now be able to have those more reflective conversations with her and now be able to talk about like what was going on for both of us internally at that time rather than trying to process it in that moment when both of us were really activated, really kind of emotionally raw from the revelation itself. And I think, I guess, like a little bit on my dad's side, my parents are divorced and they were divorced when I came out. My dad did eventually find out, and then I found out, and then he told me, like, oh, it's totally fine. Like, his brother is gay, my uncle, and I didn't know this at all. I have learned since about all these gay family members that nobody ever told me about growing up. But he's like, oh yeah, like my brother was gay. He was a judge in the ballroom scene. He was known for being especially vicious and really tearing the queens down. And I was like, I would have loved to know this. Like that would have been great if I could have like connected with him, because he had passed by that point.
Yeah.
And it was just like in all these years of as I grow up learning more about the family history that I was not told about as a child, learning like, oh yes, that's your uncle. He's a confirmed bachelor. He was in the Navy for many years and then he did this and that. And like he's never been married, he's never had a girlfriend, but like we just don't talk about what he's doing. And it's like, okay, like why didn't you tell me that my uncle who lives in New York and goes to musicals every single week is like this? And I could have connected with him about that. And I could
Right.
have had like these people who have been in my life for so many years. I could have had like these role models. I could have had these people that
Mm.
I could have talked to about what I was feeling, what I was going through, and not have felt so isolated and like felt like I am the first queer person to ever exist in my family, like in this life.
Yeah, I relate to that deeply. Two thoughts from what you shared. I think it's really vital to name. So something that we address in spiritual direction with parents frequently. There is a trauma response that we can have to a loved one coming out, especially not especially, but for example, those of us who grew up through the 80s and the worst of the AIDS epidemic and all of that space, that, like you said with your mom, I have not only am I bringing up all of these tragic memories, but now I have this fear for this loved one in my life that the narrative I have is gay people die. And they die horribly and often alone and isolated. And so there's a fear that has to be worked through that is beyond just more of a selfish grieving. Grieving isn't selfish, but more of a self-centered or self-focused grieving. The other thing you mentioned was came too quickly, and I think working with the mama bears and the free mom hugs movement, we see this a lot. Um, sometimes I just want to say, hey, be cool. just be chill a little bit. Can just give us a 60-second of what too quickly might look like.
Um, I think especially for like a teenager who wanted to have secrets and wanted to be mysterious and unknowable to my parents, I didn't want her asking all these questions. I didn't want to have to explain like do I have some secret relationship with my friend? Do I have this or that going on? Do I like was I remember one time when I was learning to drive, I was looking out the window, not paying attention, which is like, I know that's horrible at 16 when you're like trying to teach a child to drive and it's like, oh my gosh, we're gonna die. But I was just like kind of absentmindedly staring out the window. And these two guys walked by, and my mom's like, oh, okay. Like, I see why I'm like, no, mom, like, I wasn't checking these guys out. I was just a mindless teenager not paying attention during my driving lesson. And
Uh,
it was like, please don't like be weird about this. I don't want to
totally.
acknowledge that I could ever be attracted to anyone in front of my mom. I like already told her that I'm gay. She doesn't need to know that I have ever experienced attraction.
Right. Yeah, it's bad enough in the heteronormative space. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Fergus, take us a little deeper in your story.
Yeah, so this sort of memory came back to me where I was about this would have been the late 80s. I was probably 9, 10, 11. And my parents sat my sister and me down in the living room, and this was in the 80s, and they told us, if you're ever in trouble, don't be afraid to come to us. We love you no matter what. And if you happen to be gay, don't be afraid to come to us. We love you no matter what. And it was the strangest thing. Like, I was kind of dreading the bird and bees conversation from my parents that friends at school had been saying they're reporting that they've been getting. I didn't want to have that conversation. And this and I thought that's what this was going to be, and that was it. That's where they left it. And I was just really confused because the kids in school were, AIDS was very much talked about, and it was like, I mean, the gay, it was bad, and the things that were said were really awful. And I knew that it had something to do with me. Like I said before, I was pushing it all the way down, and it did not. I didn't figure out until um when my dad died and I was writing his obituary, what the context for that was that that was when he was counseling those gay men who were dying of AIDS, and many of them had been disowned by their families and their parents, and they did not want me or my sister to experience something like that. And and my dad had experienced that himself when he married my mom. When he was a Catholic priest, and they fell in love. They couldn't talk about their love. So, they met in Alabama. They were both from Ireland, and they didn't know each other. They met in Gadsden, Alabama, in 19, well, mom got there in 1960 and he arrived in 63. And she couldn't tell him for 4 years how she felt because it was so taboo, and she didn't want to ruin both of their lives. The worst thing that could happen. And Ireland at that time was the most conservative Catholic country in the world. It was very, I mean, Ireland was a theocracy, really. And and so, the nothing would bring more pride to an Irish mother than having a son become a priest. And then nothing could bring more disgrace on the family than leaving the priesthood. And so, but anyway, they when they finally admitted their feelings for each other, and then they couldn't do anything about it for several years. They were like, well, we can't. Okay, we know this, but we're not going to. And so eventually, I won't go into their whole story, but certain things that caused them to my mom leave the convent, and then my dad to propose marriage, and he made the decision that I'm meant to be a priest. I'm not. I'm called. I have a vocation to be a priest. He could have been laicized, but he did not want that, and so he was actually excommunicated. And he knew that was coming. He could have avoided that. But when he went home, his mother said, "Don't come home." When he and my mom moved back to Ireland, and no one would hire him. He was blacklisted in the country. He couldn't get a job, and so they had to come back to Alabama. My sister was born. They had to come back to Alabama because he couldn't make a living. He played his accordion on the streets of Dublin, to make some money to feed the
Wow.
family, and that was all he could do. But the good news is his mother, once my sister was born and she met my sister Neve, little baby, all was forgiven. Like she just melted, and that was lovely, beautiful. But at the same time, he never forgot that initial experience of rejection, of don't come home. And so I've thought a lot about this, like how that affected his acceptance of me. So, by the time when I did come out to him at that Sunday dinner, I was like, I guess I'm going to tell you. And he immediately said, "This is cause for celebration." He went straight to the Bible and said, in a good way, it's no secret that David and Jonathan had a same-sex relationship. He went to Irish mythology and brought in, the hero Cuchulainn and Ferdia, these warriors. So he did everything he knew in that moment to make me feel loved and comfortable and normal, and better than normal, really. I mean, he was like, he raised a toast. He's like, this is cause for celebration, and I could not have asked for a better coming out. Now my mother was a little bit was a little bit different, and she just got really quiet. And I will never forget. She was sitting right across from me. Dad was on the right side, and she just started like looked down at the plate, her chicken, and just sort of like became silent. And like you said, Laura Beth, earlier, you kind of nailed it when you said like they have these ideas of grandchildren and sort of things like that. And I learned over the coming days that that's what it was for my mom. She may have also had those fears too about, you know, what could happen to me, and she did. She worried for me in a lot of different ways. And a lot of it was grandchildren. Thankfully my sister had, gave her two grandchildren. But so anyway, you know, I was very fortunate for that, the way that it turned out. And over time, like, she became very accepting. I mean, she loved me, and
Um,
that's when she wanted me to be happy. And then when I met my husband, Michael, she absolutely fell in love with him. And
mm,
and when right after my dad died, my mom, broke her hip, fell and broke her hip very soon after, and like went on hospice. And Michael said, move her home with us, and we did. And we got to take care of her, for the to the end of her life. And it was just the most beautiful thing. And she would say to me, when I would, bring her to bed at night, she would say, we'd pass this picture of my dad, and we had these pictures in her room, and she would just look at his picture, and she often said, she goes, he blessed your marriage to Michael, didn't he? And I said, yes, he did. And she said, God, he was always so far ahead of his time.
wow.
And yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Um, Again, in case you were wondering, the goosebumps came when he went to get the Bible to celebrate.
Mm,
That is not a narrative we hear nearly enough in our community.
mm,
Usually, when the parents run for the Bible, it's to condemn, to push back, to question, um, but to lean into those that mythology as well as the narratives of Scripture and who we are. What a gift!
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Fergus. Aaron. Oh, one more question, Fergus. Did you inherit the accordion skills?
I wish I could say I did, but I didn't.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Aaron, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, that's fine.
Mhm.
So I think my sister and I, we were active in the yearly meeting that split. So for her, it was like we were on the same journey with different experiences in the sense that she's not bi, she didn't come out during all of this, but she came around in that sense. My mom was not active in the yearly meeting, but she has been active in therapy my entire life and
Mm,
went to grad school at the same time I did to become a therapist. And so she was doing a lot of work in that I think helped her come around. Um, I think also, um, I don't think she would use the word deconstructing or deconstruction to describe her process, but she had done a lot of unpacking of the things that she learned growing up, the things that she taught me growing up, just to understand, you know, what she actually believed. And so I think for her, coming around was a lot due to all of that work that she was doing. Um, I think she also has always had a more curious approach to things that she's not expecting anyway. And so the fact that like her response was, "Oh, well, that's new, so I have some learning to do." That didn't really surprise me, other than, my adrenaline was so high. I was like, "Oh, okay." You know,
mm,
and then my dad, I still think he hasn't fully come around. But I think he's trying in his simple way. I don't know how else to describe it, but he in his letter responding to me, he acknowledged that I was bi, which is what I'd asked for. And so then we started communicating more and had other conflict, not related, that he does not realize, like, we don't talk now as well. And he doesn't realize that it's related to his poor behavior about other things. He thinks it's because I'm queer and he's not okay with that. So, which there was a whole conversation, um, quite a while back where I had heard him make judgmental comments about someone else that I knew growing up for something completely unrelated to queerness. But I said to him, "So you made these judgmental comments about her. If I marry a woman, are you going to make judgmental comments about me?" And his response was, "Probably." I was like, "Okay, that's good to know."
mm.
Um,
For
he,
foreknown is forewarned. Yeah.
right, yeah, and he's of the mindset that like what what he believes is love is enough, but his version of love is like, well, yeah, if you were marrying a woman, like I would still love you, but I couldn't come to the wedding and condone that. So, I'm I'm married to a trans man, but I will say my dad did a great job with my spouse because I think he came around more on that than on me. um, because the first time they met, my dad was intentionally using the correct pronouns, and I was like, "Who are you? What
Interesting.
is happening?" Yeah, so
Yeah. A lot of
I do think that there's potential there if there was repair in our relationship in other ways for him to come around more, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Two
Mhm.
two things that I feel like you highlighted there. One is all the layers. There are
Mhm.
so many layers to this whole coming around process that has to do with relational dynamics and family
Yeah.
history and personal, like that are so much beyond our sexual or gender identity.
Mhm.
Um, and the other thing I love that you named is the adrenaline. there is so much anticipation and excitement and buildup that we experience as the person coming out and in that process of our coming around, um, that we are then sparking that adrenaline
Mm-hmm.
very instantly. So there is a actual physical response
Yeah.
that is happening, that is driving our emotions, driving our mental capacity to respond in a moment or to engage in a moment. And Ruben, that goes back to your strategy that you offered of saying, give it 24 hours,
Yeah.
let those things work through the system, and let it be in there. And that's not true just with the initial coming out. That is
Right.
true with conversations that come later down the line. That is
Mhm.
true with evolutions. The first time we bring a partner home, announcing a proposal, or I came out as trans, then intersex, then lesbian. The one that really got them worried about my salvation was coming out as a Christian mystic, and all of those things have some intentionality and some excitement and
Yeah.
adrenaline that is born in us. So, yeah, what wonderful stories, and what great thoughts and conversation to put on the table. I know I'm going to be processing some of those for a little bit too. Parents that are joining us, I hope there have been nuggets here. Um, um, yeah, do we have any questions, Samantha? Has there been anything?
There's been nothing in the chat, but if anybody feels comfortable, they are welcome to unmute and ask a question of their panel. You are also welcome to throw it in the chat for us.
This is where we get to be okay with the silence for a moment. Ruben, did you have
Actually, just one of the things I wanted to comment on is
yeah.
I think what a lot of people, I know what I thought as soon as I came out, everything would be all right. The world, that
Mm,
I would, I would be centered almost immediately. And boy, was I, because I think I wanted it to, because I had been moving to this crescendo, and I realized I had to, it was like being a baby all over again. I had to learn how to walk. But the difference was I didn't remember when I went boom when I was 1 or 2 years old. I was remembering each time I fell along with the people on the journey with me.
mm,
And when I made that change in my head, it was also easier. It was also easier for everyone else. It's like, you're not suddenly going to be this perfectly, maybe some people were perfectly integrated. I was not as perfectly integrated as I hoped would
mm,
occur at that moment. And yet, I also realized I was never going to be perfectly integrated because we're all works of
yeah.
art in
Mm,
progress. And so
yeah.
that's what I think was important for me and my family and those around. It's like, it's a journey. And don't look, if I took the pressure off of being perfect and took the pressure off them being perfect, I wasn't going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I had to
Yeah.
remember what was the good here. And if I can remember the love, I don't need to do the Norman Rockwell cookie cutter appearance, that wasn't what I or they needed.
Yeah. I can't relate because I did it all right the first time. And not at all. Not even remotely. But what you're talking about in Christianese sounds a lot like grace, giving yourself that grace, giving others that grace around you to fall and stand back up again. And I think it's a word that is often overused and used in a way that is controlling and manipulative, but in at its core, at its heart, I think is an incredibly empathetic and powerful concept to engage and embrace as we go through this process.
And
Yeah,
not
thanks.
and not ironically, my mother's name was Grace.
Okay, there you go.
Been such a joy. Wow, what a gift. Thank you all so much for your honesty, your vulnerability. It genuinely feels like you've given us a piece of something you hold dear, and now we get to carry it forward. So thank you for that. As we are in this space, I want you to know I realized I forgot to say this at the top of the hour, so I apologize for that. This is a recorded session. None of your story, though, like if you are not a panelist, you will not be featured in any edit of the recording that might get shared. So don't worry about that. You are totally safe here. Our team, our comms team is amazing, and so they will make sure you are safe in this space as you are protecting your loved ones and yourself. So with that in mind, it is extra appreciated that you would share your stories here as you felt comfortable, and our panelists as well. So thank you so much. Before you go, because I love a tactile thing, I love something I can like do, something I have with me to like think about what I thought, like what we learned here and what we kind of cultivated in this space. And so one of the things our team thought would be really fun is kind of who do we want to be to our loved ones? And so we came up with this idea of a allyship vision statement. It is structured around this idea of you get to decide who you are in this space, but also you come with an open heart and an open ear to hear what your loved one might need from you. And so we've written this all out, but this really is meant for you to kind of make it your own. And so we've got an option for you to write your own, but I've also written a couple of them out so you can kind of see what that could look like and what that could feel like. So if you want, read with me. I choose love that grows. I will make my home a place of safety and belonging where my child does not have to hide any part of who they are. I will place my own comfort aside to make space for and protect the well-being of my LGBTQ plus loved one. I will speak words that affirm their worth, defend their dignity when it is challenged, and nurture the fullness of their life. I will seek community with other parents and families who are learning how to love well. I will listen to LGBTQ plus voices and trust the wisdom of those who have walked this path. My love will continue to grow, deepen and expand, and together we will create a life filled with radical belonging. Another option could read, I choose love that grows. I believe my child is a gift created with beauty, dignity, and purpose. Their identity is who they are, a life to celebrate, and someone I value. I commit to learning, listening, and growing so that my love for them continues to deepen. I recognize that I may still be learning. When I make mistakes, I will give myself grace. I will repair, keep listening, and continue the journey. My growth is an act of love. I will not allow fear, shame, or the opinions of others to silence my support for my child. Instead, I will practice courage, choosing connection over control and curiosity over judgment. I choose to be an ally in both quiet and visible ways, through my words, my actions, and my willingness to stand beside my child in every season of their life. My love will continue to grow, deepen, and expand, and together we will create a life filled with radical belonging. Friends, before we do our last just kind of deep moment together, I do want to share with you, we have an amazing event coming up next month on May 16th and 17th. I've just thrown the link in the chat for you. This is your opportunity to take the little nugget of what we did here today and expand it out to a whole weekend of experience. And that is going to be such a gift as you are on this journey. And so I'm encouraging you to think about joining us. If you have questions about it, you can email me. My email is the one that sent you all the reminders and everything. So as you kind of have this idea of like, do I want to explore more of these? Do I want to ask more questions? Do I want to find more people who believe like I believe and want to like do a little bit better each day for their LGBTQ plus loved ones? This is the time. This is the space to do that. I will tell you too, this is really exciting. We will actually, for the very first time, expand our Parent and Family Summit to include LGBTQ plus parents. And this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for you to find peers that are also queer, right? And so you can ask your peers questions and they can ask you questions. And this can be much more of a giving experience. So we're not relying on our specific, maybe children or loved ones to answer all of our questions and do the education of us, right? And so by being here, you're taking that step. And by coming to our summit, you're going to have the opportunity to learn even more and jump in even more. We have programming all year round. I'm going to have another one of these fun webinar style kind of conversations in June. It will be mostly geared towards LGBTQ plus parents since we focused on the parents of LGBTQ for this one, but come and learn. There's no reason not to. These events are free and it's exciting to see you every single time. Come to the summit though. That's really going to be where you're going to get so much good, as Hebrew says, right? Meat. I want the meat of it all. And so come get that good, hearty edification and learning in this space because we are people who love you and love God, and we know that God is going to do something really cool with you if we allow that work to happen, right? But we have to show up for that to be the case. So as we go from this place, my friends, I want to hear all your thoughts and ideas. So please reach out, email me with anything you need. But as we go from here, let's take a few deep breaths and say a word of blessing. Gracious Creator, you brought each of us to this place from our remote places, vastly differing experiences, wide age ranges, wide experiences, and you look at all of us and you say, this moment was ordained. So thank you. You brought us here, and now we go from this place a little bit more ready to love each other a little bit better. So God, grant us the ability to love you and to love others as you do. It is in your precious name we pray. Amen. Oh, I adore you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye, friends.